Wounded seagulls, eh, Sasha?
Dangerous animal, as someone said.
Yeah. All right. They looked anything but flying around in circles, though.
Well, they flew circles around Arsenal,
Nice.
certainly. Stupendous performance, under a lot of pressure. And almost, it was almost like in The Matrix where he goes, they beckon Arsenal towards them and then doing things to them.
Yeah.
And they always had an angle to pass. They always had an out ball to Mitoma or to Enciso down the flanks. Arsenal did have some success in the first half and kind of cramming them in a little bit. And as Arteta rued after the game, they didn't really take advantage of that. But if you think about it, in the entire game, perhaps Arsenal was so focused on, just trying to nullify Brighton, didn't really create anything themselves at all. Like, I can't remember a single significant chance. Perhaps Trossard, when he hits the bar, he needs to convert that. But apart from that, it was a game which was run by Brighton, where Brighton turned the screw, which was just wonderful to watch because I thought they targeted Arsenal quite well. And it was interesting to hear before the game that, Ben White is a good 1v1 defender. They had him on toast, and Enciso and Mitoma. So it's all over the pitch. They were just the better side.
Daniel, you've been... I was reading your thoughts on Brighton. Very much Daniel and Brighton sitting in a tree, your column this morning.
Who isn't?
I think I wrote, unless you're a Crystal Palace fan always or an Arsenal fan this weekend, you should be sitting in that tree with Brighton. There's room for everyone. What really interests me after the game is that Mikel Arteta was understandably focusing on Arsenal, and he kind of said what we did is we made all the wrong decisions in the second half, which is right. But the great trick of Brighton is that they force you into making decisions that you don't want to have to make, whether it's trying to pass under pressure and getting caught, or whether it's what Arsenal eventually ended up settling for, which is just going long from Aaron Ramsdale, because they were like, we can't deal with this, so let's just try and bypass this. And that's exactly what they wanted, because that's why they put Lewis Dunk as a centre-back to clear away all that. It was a genuinely magnificent performance. And the thing I like about Brighton more under De Zerbi than Potter, who let's remember, started and carried on all this, is that they're quite nasty now. They're quite dark artsy. I think the accusation under Potter is they were kind of a really nice team to watch, and they gave you misloads of chances to give you a chance, and everyone loved watching them, but they were never really a kind of mean team. And there's elements of that in there now.
Yeah.
That high five between Caicedo and Mitoma after Caicedo's just done Martinelli. There is an element of that. And if you are going to punch above your weight, you need to do that. You can't just beat big teams by just kind of playing pretty football. It isn't just about that.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a microcosm. That was it. Martinelli goes in quite a nasty way on Mitoma. And I
thought it was a much nastier challenge, to be honest, the Martinelli one, because he could have literally knocked him out.
Yeah.
And I think, in that situation in the game, it's not that you're inviting retaliation, but... And I don't want to accuse Caicedo of being retaliation, but you want to put the crunchy back on the guy, saying, "Dude, what are you doing?" So you can't do this. I mean, unfortunately, Martinelli got injured, but it kind of also set the pattern for the first maybe 20 minutes, which was a bit of a mess. Everyone's kind of diving in. But I think in the middle of this thing, the team that emerged with a clearer picture again was Brighton, and I thought. Interestingly, that you referenced sort of Mitoma, because after the game at the presser, De Zerbi was asked, the fact that you showed courage, was it because, Mitoma got taken out and then he got up and carried on? And he goes, no. What I see as courage is Colwill sticking to Odegaard for the entire game. That, for me, is courage. So he almost, this whole Mitoma getting up, that's a given. It's the fact that you stick to your principles, the ideas, to what we talked about. And I was thinking going to the last 10 minutes, it was still 1-0. But I thought De Zerbi at that stage would have been happy because Brighton, especially after what happened on Monday, played like they should have done. And I think that's what he wanted from them.
Billy Gilmore back in the starting lineup for this game. Roulang says, please can you talk about how Billy Gilmore is still only 21 and seems totally unfazed by anything, most recently the Emirates. Much love to you all. Thanks, Roulang.
Well, his facial hair definitely makes him look like he's 21, I think that's for sure. But so exciting to watch Brighton play. And I think so much of it comes down to the fact that they play in a completely different way. So much of what we've been saying about them so far has been about how Arteta's saying, we made the wrong decisions against them. And I think this is why they're so interesting to watch, because they force oppositions to have to make decisions in a way that I think a lot of Premier League sides don't really. I think for a team like Brighton to force Arsenal to have to think, how are we going to approach this game?
How do they do that, John?
Well, I think so much of what they do is about tempo, right? So it's about possessing the ball at the back, being really patient, baiting opposition players forward, and then having the ability to play through that press and then get into these situations where they can do these really, really quick attacking moves, and they bait the press forward in order to generate space to then be able to attack, to make it much more dangerous for the players that they have to be able to make those sorts of moves. And I think this is going to be the really interesting question for next season. Is going to be, once the Premier League analysts have a summer to think about how we start approaching Brighton, we'll start seeing.
What will they come? You've just come back from lecturing at Cambridge University about data in football. What boffins like you, John? What would they come up with?
Well, I think if you look through some of the results that Brighton have had this season, that they've dropped points against some teams that you might expect them not to drop points against. And I think that sort of raises questions about how good they would be at breaking down low blocks. So I think that the obvious way of playing against a team like Brighton is to say, we're not going to engage in this sort of cat and mouse game at all. We'll sit deep and then force you to break us down,
like Everton last weekend.
Yeah, and I think that once that sort of thing starts happening, the problem is for the big teams is they don't like playing like that, because they think, well, we've got the better quality of players, therefore we should be able to beat them at our own game. And I think that's where it's going to be really fascinating. It's going to be how do these teams decide we should play against them. I think that Arsenal were really good against Brighton out of possession. I thought that they were one of the best teams out of possession in the league, and I think they caused Brighton a lot of problems in terms of Brighton usually want to build up through the middle and then expand from there. They were forcing them out wide and forcing them into these situations where all they could do was go long. And Brighton, to be fair, they played it over that press quite a lot, which is what you wouldn't really expect from a De Zerbi team. But it worked out. And I think on another day the result could have been different, and we could be talking about how good Arsenal were.
Really, that finer margin, do you think, even with a 3-0 scoreline?
Yeah, I think so. I think with everything in the background, the context, I think Manchester City winning against Everton, so you've already got that, and then their goal goes in first, and I think that changes the flow of the game. I do think that Brighton were marginally the better team, but marginally the better team don't always win in these games.
No, for sure. And it's an important point about the psychology of what that did to Arsenal. Maybe even Martinelli going in with his elbow on Mitoma, because we saw what happened when Xhaka did that to Liverpool and what the reaction that proved. But anyway, speaking of Liverpool, 4 points above Brighton, but Brighton have a game in hand in the race for fifth. Sasha?
Well, see, that's the interesting thing. It's so De Zerbi again was being asked about Europe, and he's like, Europe Thursday nights. But no, it's not Thursday nights. It's they're still very much, I think, in the shout of the Champions League. If Liverpool are, which again, a low percentage.
They're 8 points with a game in hand, but still 8 points.
Eight points is 5. 5 is 1. So basically, for 5 points to swing to happen, they need to win 3, or 4 in this case. And all Newcastle United have to do is win 1, draw 1, lose 1. Given the recent form, that is not implausible. And there's 2 teams dropping points as well. Also for Brighton, perhaps Liverpool need to drop points. But what it comes down to now is that Brighton are going to go hell for leather on Thursday against Newcastle, because that is actually realistically a bit of a ding-dong. If they win that game, they have a chance.
6-pointer.
Yeah, that is a real 6-pointer. Don't look at the table like that. I think it's much closer. And also, I think if Newcastle were to lose that game, things would get wobbly.
Hello there. If you've enjoyed this video, why not subscribe to this channel? The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.